Donald Trump went on Stuart Varney's show, I think on Fox Business or Fox News. I think it's Fox Business. And he had so many moments that went viral. So the first one that I want to show you here, he's asked very specifically, and actually credit to Stuart Varney on this. I never thought I'd say those words in my life because he's generally a hideous host. He's terrible. But he's asked in a very straightforward way, what would you do differently from Joe Biden with this Russian war on Ukraine? What would you do differently? Give me specifics. Give me specifics. He actually presses him a number of times on it. He doesn't answer because he doesn't have an answer. But then finally at the end, he says something that he would do differently. And holy cow, is it bad?
Sad to watch.
There's this discussion about whether we should send jets, MiG jets, to help the Ukrainian Air Force. Would you send in that kind of help?
Well, maybe even more, to be honest with you. And I'm the one that would have stayed out. I'm the one that would have stayed out. Let me just explain that Putin is saying things like, don't you dare send anything in. In the meantime, he's killing thousands and thousands of people. So he's acting like we're an aggressor. If we send in some old 44-year-old plane that probably gets shot out of the sky pretty quickly, and he's acting like we're terrible people if we do that. But he's killing tens of thousands of people, far more than they're reporting. You don't knock down those buildings and blow up those buildings and they say 2 people were injured slightly. And thousands of people are being killed. And when he says, don't you dare do that, and we all say, oh, he said don't do it, we don't want to start. The fact is that what he's doing is a human tragedy. There's not been anything like this, in a sense, maybe ever, but certainly since World War II when you look at it. But there's never been anything like this.
So what do you do now? You said you'd maybe do more than just send in the MiG jets. All right. What more?
What I would do is we have tremendous military capability. And what we can do without planes, to be honest with you, without 44-year-old jets, what we can do is enormous. And we should be doing it. And we should be helping them to survive. And they're doing an amazing job. But, you know, I was the one that sent in the javelins. I mean, everyone refuses to acknowledge that. And I took a lot of heat. And I sent it in very openly and glowingly. And they said Obama sent blankets and Trump sent javelins. Well, nobody knew how well those javelins would do and how well they. But those javelins that knocked out all the tanks, those were sent by me. And we sent them in large numbers, too. I didn't even realize at the time when I sent them, I said, man, you know, that's a lot of stuff we're sending, but let's do it. Let them have a chance. Who would have thought that they would have been so powerful, the way they protected that country? But they need other kinds of help. I couldn't talk, but I listened to him constantly using the N-word. That's the N-word. And he's constantly using it, the nuclear word. And we never talk. We say, oh, he's a nuclear power. But we're a greater nuclear power. We have the greatest submarines in the world, most powerful machines ever built, most powerful, and they got built under me, most powerful machines ever built, and nobody knows where they are. And you should say, look, if you mention that word one more time, we're going to send them over, and we'll be coasting back and forth up and down your coast.
Yeah, that is a terrible idea. That's a horrendous idea. He's saying, send our nuclear submarines to Russia. That's what he's saying. So this is actually, as we talk about Trump, this was actually my concern all along. If he was still in office right now, my concern is not like a lot of the resistance liberals who are like, oh, he's Vladimir Putin's puppet, so he's going to let him do whatever he wants to do and take Ukraine and like support it, and he's going to pull out of NATO. This is like, you know, the silly line, which is Russiagate brainworms. The thing that concerned me was actually the exact opposite, which is because you have this media environment saying that Trump is Putin's buddy and he's his puppet and, you know, Putin owns Trump and all that stuff, that Trump will overreact in the other direction to try to prove to people, see, I'm not his puppet. I'm actually being tougher than anybody has ever been, ever. And this is what he's talking about here. Now, he did point out, and it's true, Trump did arm Ukraine. And unfortunately, a lot of those weapons went to the Azov battalion, went to neo-Nazis on the ground. And that's why we were against that. I was against that policy, and I was screaming about it at the top of my lungs. Now, of course, he had that phone call with Zelensky where he was basically like, look, I'm going to withhold some of this aid unless and until you, like, investigate Hunter Biden and Joe Biden and give me some dirt on them. So he was trying to take, like, mix in personal politics with actual international politics, which is totally unacceptable, and you can't do that. But having said that, he did arm them. Even before that phone call, he had armed them a lot. And that was a policy Obama didn't do because Obama didn't want to escalate with Russia. Trump was escalating with Russia like nobody's business. There were drills going on Russia's border under Donald Trump. He also axed the Nord Stream 2 pipeline and wouldn't allow it, saying, no, Russia and Germany can't have a pipeline deal because we want Germany to take our oil and gas. And so in many ways, he was very hawkish on that question. And what we're seeing here is if he was in office, especially if the argument, all these arguments of the media saying, like, do a no-fly zone, be more aggressive, be more hawkish, do this, do that, Trump would not be able to resist that pressure. And in fact, he says it, I'd go above and beyond. I'd be sending the nuclear submarines to Russia right now. That's what scares me. And by the way, further evidence for this being the real problem with Trump is, remember what happened with North Korea. How he would, like, very openly threaten nuclear war on Twitter against North Korea. So now eventually there were actually talks between us and North Korea, which is much better than escalating tensions. But when there was the escalating tensions, God damn it, that was terrifying. And I wouldn't want him as president right now because he's more erratic, he's more reflexive and impulsive. And my guess is he would try to do anything and everything to try to prove to everybody, I'm not Putin's puppet, send the nuclear submarines. And do you really want that kind of a standoff where if now there's a 3% chance of nuclear war that we're talking about, Donald Trump makes it like a 20% chance or a 17% chance or whatever it might be? That was always my fear with him. That was always my fear, is that he is too hawkish and he is too impulsive. And he would, unfortunately, get us closer to that brink. So it's the opposite of what everybody else is saying. Oh, he's going to pull out of NATO and he's going to be too much of a bitch. And no, that's not the problem. And this is why the way in which you criticize Trump is so important. It's so important to be accurate in your criticism because the stakes are as high as anybody can imagine. It's nuclear war. He's saying, I would send nuclear submarines to Russia. Now, how does Vladimir Putin react to that? What would he do in reaction to that? You don't even want to think about it. So now, of course, the other part of this is to go to the beginning. Trump's asked, like, what would you do differently than what Biden's doing? And then they're talking about maybe sending the MiGs. And Trump says, I would send more. And Varney's like, okay, what would you send? And Trump's answer is, he says, we have a tremendous military capability, enormous. Okay, tremendous, enormous, gargantuan, whatever word you want to throw in there. What more would you do? I sent in the javelins very openly and glowingly. What? Yeah, I didn't just send them in. I sent them in openly and glowingly. And then, of course, we get Putin is constantly using the N-word. He says the N-word all the time. He loves saying the N-word. And I mean nuclear when I say that. The argument from Trump is effectively, Putin threatens nuclear war, so we should too. How about no? So he couldn't really differentiate himself from Biden because most of the stuff Biden is doing is, I think, what almost any U.S. president would do. But he's saying the ways in which I would go above and beyond are objectively worse. Threaten nuclear war and send our nuclear submarines to Russia right now. That is not okay. That is not okay. How Biden is handling it is better, although I still have criticisms of Biden, of course. The collective punishment angle is inexcusable to me. You guys know my stance on this. I would do every sanction imaginable against Putin, against the oligarchs, against the military. But the second you do any sort of collective punishment sanctions, which try to implode the entire Russian economy and hurt regular Russians, I'm out. I don't want to have anything to do with ruining somebody's life who had nothing to do with what happened here. And if anything, you have so many people, thousands of people, maybe tens of thousands of people protesting the war in the streets in an authoritarian country and getting arrested. Those are heroes. And now what you're doing is enacting policy that says to them, I don't want you to be able to take money out of the bank. I don't want you to know where your next meal is coming from. I want to destroy your savings, et cetera, et cetera. That I'm not okay with. But what Biden is doing is basically every sanction imaginable while trying to be clear in his rhetoric. We don't want war with Russia. We're not going to go to war with Russia. We're ruling out a no-fly zone. We're ruling out a hot war, yada, yada. So, man. And this is the guy who's probably the favorite to be the next president of the U.S. It's either Biden or Trump who's the favorite to be the next president of the U.S. Because Trump right now is basically tied in the polls with Biden. And everybody else is nowhere to be seen. So, not good, man. Not good. Imagine this guy gets back in there. I think he's the last. You want a steady hand during a crisis. And he is the exact opposite of a steady hand. Ever since Adpocalypse, when YouTube defunded all independent news and politics overnight, we haven't trusted them. We know they can pull the rug out from underneath us at any time. If you enjoy this content, please consider tipping $1 or $2 per month on the Secular Talk Patreon. Link in the video description box below. Thanks for your support.